Hello, Stephan in Berlin.
Hello, Heidi in Rotterdam.
Ta-da! It's been 100 years. No, it's been a
A
long
hundred
time.
days. Maybe
It's
just 100 days.
yeah, maybe that's a good one.
Yeah.
But here we are again.
Yes. Happy,
Finally,
happy to see you.
yes. Well,
Yes.
we met in between, but somehow life got in the way. Um,
Yeah.
During summer, all kinds of stuff happened, but we want to try and do some jazz talks more.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I recently reviewed the last one we had,
Uh-huh.
and we were talking about Arthur Briggs.
Yes. We just started to mention him because there was this book coming out.
There he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ta-da! It
Yours
is.
looks like mine. That's interesting.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Written by Travis Atria, who
Yeah.
also wrote a book about Curtis Mayfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's an American, as far as I know. I
Yeah.
will put it here again.
Yeah.
I finally we finished it. I wasn't we didn't finish the book yet when we were talking about it, but I found it was already so exciting and so good
Yeah.
that we thought like we need to play some of his music and talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the book must be our guide today. Uh,
Let's say you will be our guide for the book because I'm still missing some parts. But at least I know the music I want to play.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I thought let's you can do it in a lot of ways and find more information, but the book is really quite good. It's I
Yeah.
really love the book. I can recommend it to everybody. It just came out this year,
Yeah.
so it's quite brand new, beginning of 2020.
And
Um
the author was working with the family of Arthur Briggs, with his
yes,
daughter, and so there is really a connection to the real stories and not only to secondhand stories. So that's
exactly.
yeah.
I think he was given access to Arthur Briggs made recordings of his memoirs. He talked, I don't know, I think on tape or something,
Yeah.
and he had access to it. So yeah, he could work with the family, and that's really
Yeah.
really important. It's really a good book. And what I really love about the book the most, it puts the story of Arthur Briggs, which was a trumpet player,
Mhm.
that a black trumpet player
Yeah.
that lived in Europe most of his life.
Yeah.
What was really good, his story is set in the time,
Yeah.
So you have a notion. There he is.
Yeah.
Look at him, handsome man.
Yeah. This is a photo from 1930 that appeared in Hot Club Journal of Hot Club de France and in Swedish Estrad Journal. So it's a
There
quite
we.
famous photo of him that was made in 1930 in Paris. So it's really, yeah,
Yeah. We will get
exactly that man we talk about. Yeah,
exactly. I
yeah,
will get to the hot club because he was
yeah,
important to the hot club de France.
yeah, yeah.
It's really so. When I was reading the book, I looked up all kinds of things. When he arrived in Europe, in Liverpool in June, I think 1919, there were some racial. I don't know. There were some fights going on in the harbor, and it's a horrible story.
Mm,
I think people should look it up. But it was placed every time something happens in history of where he was. There's a connection with the history happening in that place and that time.
mm,
It goes together. It was parallel with Arthur Briggs' life, and that puts it very much in perspective. And that's what I really loved about the book.
mm.
All these connections
Yeah,
to history
yeah, yeah.
and give you a broader scope.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot about Josephine Baker, maybe a bit. Maybe that's the only point of critique. Some reviewers said maybe too much a bit about Josephine Baker, but
Yeah.
it's also interesting because it says a lot about the time
Mm,
in
mm,
Paris and why
mm.
Josephine Baker was such a
Yeah,
important thing.
yeah.
A thing. She's like an event. She's more than a person. She was like an institution almost.
Institution or even an art object,
I
a
don't know. She
reflection
was.
and of art. Yeah, yeah,
There was a lot about. So we talk about that in our Jazz Talk number 5.
yeah,
You can go
yeah.
back to that if you if you want if you
No, let's
want
go
to know.
forward. Let's go forward to Briggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Arthur Briggs was born not in the United States and not
No.
in Europe. He came from Grenada,
Yeah.
which was a small Caribbean island in 1901.
No.
And at that time, it was a British colony.
Yeah. Not Spanish anymore, but British. That's interesting that even those citizenships always changed, but he was
Yes.
born as a British subject. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he was British, but
Yeah.
and he went to school there, and he was I'm not sure if he started. Maybe he didn't start with trumpet. I forgot about that. But he was classically schooled.
Yeah.
He had a classical music education, and he was really,
Yeah.
really. He showed already at a very early age a great talent,
Yeah.
musical talent.
Yeah.
In 1917, he followed his sister that lived in New York, his elder sister. So in 1917, he went to New York City and in Harlem.
Yeah.
So when things started to happen in Harlem, when everybody came to Harlem, he was there as well.
Yeah.
So already early, he found some jobs in music already playing. He met, I think, people like James Reese Europe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of details. I don't want to go into every detail, but his life story is so rich. But what was important, within 2 years, he met Will Marion Cook,
Yeah.
he was a band leader and he had a big orchestra, and they played all kinds of music. There were some classical numbers, I think. There was some ragtimey music,
Mhm.
maybe some Negro spirituals as well. I don't dare to say completely, but they had a broad genre, and it
Mhm.
was a big band. And they toured. It was called the New York Syncopated Orchestra.
Yeah.
They toured the Americas. I mean, North America, the States, not South America, as far as I know. But they made from there the Southern Syncopated Orchestra, and with
Yeah.
that orchestra, it was, I think, around 50 people.
Uh-huh.
We were talking about that already in our other talk 5,
Yeah.
because there were who was in that orchestra was Sidney Bechet,
Yeah.
but also what's her name? I forgot her name. Rivera. I forgot her first name. The two sisters
Yeah.
and the father. Yeah, and she recorded with
Josephine Baker later
yes. So
playing the violin.
go back to, yeah, exactly. Go back to the
Yeah.
to that talk of 5. So there were so many people in
Yeah.
that orchestra.
Yeah.
So with that orchestra, Arthur Briggs was there as well.
Yeah.
So in 1919, with the Southern Syncopated Orchestra and Arthur Briggs, they were going on tour in 1919 to the UK. So they arrived in Liverpool, but they went to London. And what's funny, Sidney Bechet and Arthur Briggs, they hang out together.
Mm.
And Arthur Briggs, maybe I don't know. They maybe together, they saw, I think in a window, a shop window. Maybe I'm not.
Oh, as far as I know, Arthur Briggs was a trumpet player, but he also played saxophone. He
Yes.
could play both. And
Yeah.
Sidney Bechet was just a clarinet player at that time.
Yes. And in
And
London, they got a soprano saxophone.
yeah, exactly. Arthur Briggs bought a soprano saxophone and played it. And Sidney Bechet was so amazed by the sound and this instrument. He said, "It looks like a metal clarinet." And Briggs said, "No, it's a saxophone." And he showed him the saxophone, and Bechet wanted to get his own. So Arthur Briggs bought him a saxophone and gave him lessons how to play the saxophone.
Yeah, because
That's really interesting because Sidney Bechet was just a clarinet player, not a saxophone player, but the saxophone made him famous. But his
yeah,
teacher was Arthur Briggs, who was
exactly.
famous as a trumpet player. So it's a little weird. Yeah.
Arthur Briggs taught him how to, because he was better at it.
Yeah.
But he helped
Oh,
him.
and it
I mean,
seems that it took a long while to Bechet really to understand the saxophone. He just didn't get it. He was not very talented on the saxophone. And that's
I,
really
I, I
no.
wouldn't dare, but it's funny in the book how it's described
Yes,
that
exactly. I was laughing tears when I read it.
yeah,
I was like,
it was really
oh, that's a new story to me. I like it.
So they were on tour in the UK and in London a lot, and even in August they were invited by the Prince of Wales. The Prince of Wales was very much into jazz.
Yes,
He
indeed.
was all over Europe, and like I know you know the book Bricktop. I don't have it here because I lent it to somebody to read. The Bricktop. I was talking about Bricktop. Bricktop was an African American woman that came in the 20s to Paris
Mm,
to work in Le Grand Duc,
mm,
in like a venue where there was music and entertainment, and where all the fancy people of Europe came for the
uh,
late night entertainment. People
uh-huh,
went, I don't know, they went everywhere, but late night people ended up at Bricktops.
yeah.
And Langston Hughes
Uh-huh.
was working in the kitchen at
Ah,
Le Grand Duc.
nice.
Yes, and who was the? Maybe I'll come back to that later.
Yeah.
To the owner of Le Grand Duc.
Mhm.
Um, so the Prince of Wales was always going there as well, and I think Bricktop taught the Prince of Wales how to dance Charleston.
That's good. Yeah.
So the Prince of Wales got a small section of the Southern Syncopated Orchestra,
Yeah.
including Arthur Briggs, to play, I think, in the garden of Buckingham Palace for the royal family.
Wow.
Yeah, that was like an amazing story. Anyway,
A little bit like Sir Elton John.
but better, dare I say?
Maybe better, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think so.
but the honor to play for the King and the Queen or the Prince of Wales, that's really great.
I
Yeah,
thought it was a great story.
yeah.
The Southern Syncopated Orchestra at some point like fell apart.
Yeah.
A few people. It's a tragedy. A few people were drowned. Even there was a ship accident in the Irish Sea when they were on their way to Ireland. But he was not. Arthur Briggs was not on the ship, so he was in London, and he decided to. I don't know if he was invited, but he ended up in Brussels.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
he went to the mainland Europe, and he was also in Ostend,
Mhm.
and he was in Paris, and he even ended up in Spain. He started playing everywhere, knowing a lot of musicians, and like in 1922, 1923, 1924, he was everywhere, and he played a lot for Bricktop.
Yeah.
So he was in Le Grand Duc, and the owner, that I wanted to say, the owner of Le Grand Duc was Eugene Bullard. You
Uh-huh.
should look him up. It's an interesting figure.
Yeah.
He had some clubs in Paris, but he was an African American man
Mm.
who somehow got to fly planes in the First World War.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Even outside official, because they could not be in the army, but
Mhm.
he was in like in another. I don't know. It's too detailed to get into there, but he was into like the how do you call that, the army of all the rest people, the in Dutch it's the Vreemdelingenlegioen. It's another official national army, but the army of all foreigners
Und,
together.
Legion.
I don't know how you.
Foreigners.
Yeah, I don't know how you call it in. It has something to do with that.
Yeah.
And he was called the Swallow of Death,
Mhm.
like Hirondelle
Yeah.
de la Mort.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh, and I think because he was the owner of Bricktops and he knew a lot of all the musicians that came
Yeah.
through Bricktops.
Yeah.
I read in Fats Waller's biography, at the end, it talks about the funeral of Fats Waller in New York
Uh-huh.
City. I'm not sure about the year. It said that somebody respected him with flying a plane
Yeah.
over Harlem,
Yeah.
and it doesn't say the name. And
Yeah.
it just talks about a pilot that had fought in World War One and Two, which is not
Yeah.
true if we talk about Eugene Bullard.
Yeah.
But I think it must have been this guy.
Okay.
It doesn't say in Fats Waller's book, but when I read, okay, how many African Americans would fly a warplane in World War
Yeah.
One?
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't. I looked at it. I couldn't find hardly anyone because it was really special.
Uh-huh.
Also, World War II, there was maybe one.
Mm.
There's discussion even about this person, but he flew, and it must have been him. It must have been him on Fats Wallace's funeral, and they know each other. They know each other from Bricktops.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
pictures of Bricktop and Fats Waller. Everybody was there, so that's like,
Oh, in this beautiful book, there's pictures of Fats Waller in Paris.
yeah, there you go. They were all. I mean, they were all there, and it's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, on we go. In 1925, he was even in Istanbul
Uh-huh.
playing music, and he was also in Vienna,
Yeah.
and he was in a film,
Mm-hmm.
a silent movie, and it was called Das Spielzeug von Paris. How would you translate that? The toy from Paris?
Yeah, something like this. Yeah.
And I think it's fun to see, to have a little look at that clip, because we have moving images of Arthur Briggs.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's no sound, but he's the one with a trumpet in
Yeah.
this thing. I will try and share screen and not to mess this up. I've been
Yeah.
talking already so much, so
Yeah.
maybe it's nice to have
Music
yeah.
and pictures.
I'm already messing this up. Share screen, and I want this one.
Yes. And you mute yourself.
Yes, I will in a minute, but let's have this clip.
Yes.
Let's make it big.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yes. Perfect.
Here it comes.
Yeah.
I'm coming, Virginia, I'm coming to stay. Don't hold it against me for running away. I tried to forget you and found them all wrong. Meet your bright southern moon once more, or crooner, dear old mammy tune. And if I can win you, I'll never more roam. I'm coming, Virginia, my Dixieland.
I will stop it here. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Stop share, because what I like about this picture, maybe I should get it big again.
Yeah.
There's Arthur Briggs
Uh-huh.
with a soprano saxophone.
Yes.
But in the clip, he was with a trumpet, or maybe I don't know if
Yeah.
it was a cornet. I can't
Yeah.
tell.
Right.
But I don't know even what the movie is about. It's a bit weird. I scrolled through the whole movie. You can find it on YouTube. It's with organ music under it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit, I don't know what it's about. I should have looked it up maybe, but I've found it was, what's that?
This is the record.
Yeah, because it was
the
with
soundtrack.
Paul Bowley.
Yeah, but this record is a little too new for this movie because this record is
Yeah,
from
the
1927.
film is from 1925, I believe. After that, after Vienna, he ends up in Berlin in
Yeah.
1926,
Yeah.
working for the Barberina, and
Yeah.
later in 27 for the Eden Hotel. You can tell us more about it. The only thing I found, it was like, wow, wow, wow. He made his first recordings in Berlin,
Yes.
and
Right.
they made 1,000 sites.
Uh-huh.
Oh, they recorded 1,000 songs for Deutsche Grammophon, and 60, no, not 1,000, 100. Jesus, I'm over Rick. 100. 100 is a lot.
Yeah.
64 of them were released.
Yeah.
And Al Bowley
And
was.
he was a soloist with other orchestras too. So Marek Weber hired him for recordings for Electrola. So he plays a fantastic trumpet on Crazy Birds, Crazy Tune, and on Blue Skies. You hear it's Arthur Briggs. And he even made an advertising record. It seems to be his very first before Clausophone in 1926 for Bottina shoes. It's a small commercial record. And it's just a hot trumpet and yeah, for shoes. Why not? But yeah, the first real big hiring, the first soirees that really made him famous were in a very fancy, very big ballroom next to the Zoo of Berlin in Charlottenburg at Hardenbergstraße. And this club was named after a beautiful dancer who was at the court of Frederick the Great.
Aha,
the
Friedrich der
soloist. And
Große.
her name, coming from Italy, was La Barberina. So making allusion to this beautiful dancer in the 18th century, this club was called Barberina because the inside is not Art Deco. It's very, very Baroque.
Mhm.
It's neo-Roman. This is what in the 1910th, in the beginning of the 20th century, the bourgeois people and the avant-garde people would recognize with disgust. And it was called, yeah, there was already a kind of racism going on or prejudices. It was called the Jewish Baroque.
Aha.
Because
Oh, really?
very often it was Jewish financiers putting money into a nightclub or into a ballroom for the masses. So this was a little Jewish Baroque style. But
Aha.
still, Barberina was very famous, and they had as audience, they were counting on the millionaires to come.
Yeah,
So
like
they
I've
were
seen
hiring,
all the rich people traveling all around Europe, like the Prince of Wales.
yeah, and they were hiring show dancers and offering international show programs. So they had artists coming and perform, sisters singing and jugglers and Japanese dancers and animation with dancing games. And they had the most famous orchestras. Like here, they have an advertising for Bernard Ete, who was a very, very famous orchestra player, having a big band already in the 20s. And he was hiring American musicians too. So he had the drummer Dick Stauf, for example, playing with him and making international repertory. And he was performing for Max Reinhardt in the big revues in Schauspielhaus. And with this Barberina, it was not only one club that belonged to one person, but Barberina was a double club with Villa d'Este, Ambassadeur Barberina, and Valencia. So it was in the same block, four clubs working together. And Barberina was a double club, Ambassadeur and Barberina. So they were hiring Lud Gluskin, and Sam Wooding and the Chocolate Kitties were performing there. And the New Yorkers, Jazz Kings, were there. The New Yorkers was really an American band joining Berlin and making their very first recordings in Berlin for Triagon. And the drummer of this band, the New Yorkers, was Dave Tuff. That's an internal joke for us harangue DJs, but Dave Tuff.
Already in Berlin in the 20s.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, hello, Anton.
Hello, Anton. It's Dave Tuff. Yeah, but the interesting part is I have here a bill from Valencia that was linked to Barberina Club. And you see these people in November 1927.
Oh my goodness.
They had one liquor,
Yeah.
one mocker, and two liquor, one mocker, one cocktail. And they were paying 11 marks and 30 for this.
So how much would that be today?
This would be around 60 euros.
Yeah.
So these
Herr
clubs,
Oberts, zwei Mokka.
Valencia and Barberina, they were called the clubs of the millionaires.
Oh my
So it
goodness.
was really for the elaborated, high-class people that loved it and then went there.
High society.
Yeah, kind of. And the avant-garde would perform there, but they would not really feel understood because it was very fancy and very chic. And yeah, here again, an inside card of the dancing of Barberina.
Mhm.
And at least they had a little modern looking bar. So you see
Ah,
this
yeah, yeah. It's
expressionist
like, yeah,
bar
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
in
more
the
modern.
20s.
More, yeah.
So this Barberina was closed in 1939. It was so fancy and so chic, and at that time already more than 20 years old, and it would have needed some renovation, so they preferred closing it. And finally, the German Farmers Association of Fat and Milk Products got there. So you think like, okay, so it was keep on churning till the butter comes. But that's why Noni Harris.
That's far later. Briggs
Yeah,
was
yeah, of
there.
course.
Briggs band was there for quite some for a few months, I think.
Yeah,
The owner, or the one
yeah.
that
Manager, yeah.
yeah, that she was a woman.
Mhm.
She was a bit when she saw Arthur Briggs, she wouldn't have a black man. She
Yeah,
was making a comment about that, but
yeah.
then she saw how professional he was. She took it back immediately.
Mhm.
She was a bit ashamed of herself.
Yeah.
And it was so good that Heidi later actually she became a resistance, a famous,
Oh yeah.
an
Okay.
important
Yeah.
figure in the German
Mhm.
resistance.
Mhm.
That was also
Yeah.
interesting. But they played there. They had a good engagement. And
Yeah.
then later they were in the. Do you have more to tell about the Barberina, or you can tell us a bit about the Eden Hotel as well?
Oh yeah. Eden Hotel, there is more material about Eden Hotel because Barberina was very famous in the late 20s and maybe until 1931. And then the rising star of the millionaires with the economic crisis fell down, and Barberina was still there, but it had not the same reputation like in 1927 or 28. But Eden Hotel was the most amazing, most modern, biggest hotel you can imagine, next to the aquarium behind the Gedächtniskirche and not far away from Romanisches Café, Rachmonisches Café, they call it in Yiddish. Yeah, always making fun, those Berliners. It was really the avant-garde area. It was Kurfürstendamm and Tauentziehen. And as we know, the name of flapper girls, we all have an association of this tail, this
Short
haircut.
hair.
Yeah, and
My
the
hair
Louis
used to.
style, yeah, a little bit like this, and the nice jewels and the chic Charleston dresses and so on. And those flapperettes or flapper girls in Berlin, they were not called flapper girls because that's American. They were called Tauentziehen girls. It had to do with emancipation, with reform, get off the horrible dresses, take something modern and
Yeah, yeah. Get out of the corsets.
yes, exactly. And it had to do with emancipation, like don't wait for your husband, have fun. You are a woman and you have the right of a sexuality.
It
So this was the idea of town scene girls, and it was a little decadent, of
Yeah,
course.
it was
But
also a bit of the bit of thing of the more that were well to do that didn't have to work. There
yeah.
also some
Well, when they worked in Augsburger Straße and on town scene in rooms that you could rent for 1 hour.
no, I mean there were also probably working class girls that also got
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
got something to cut
But
their hair and
in Berlin at that time, in the 10th and in the 20s, prostitution or just for fun prostitution. So promiscuous living was very, very high and very big. And the town scene girl had always this double sense of
yeah.
emancipation, but also this bitter bad taste side. Yeah.
There was
That
something
was this double side. So it was said that the Eden Hotel, being the most modern hotel with electricity in each room, with fluent warm water in each room had a bathroom. Sometimes it was 2 rooms sharing one bathroom with a bathtub and warm water in the middle. But each room had access to a bathroom and to electricity. So this was really crazy. And they had telephone in each room already in 1919, 1920. So this really was the most strange thing going on, the most modern part. And I don't remember, 248 rooms, something like this. It really
Wow,
was
that was really
quite
big.
big. It was really big, big, big. 5 stories high, and on the 6th floor there was a huge rooftop garden, and it was so huge that they put a veranda with opening roof, for that in summer the band for the tea dance would play under the
Open air,
open air
under the stars.
at night under the stars. And this area was so big and so tall. Oh, here is a photo of this ballroom. You see, it's quite modern.
Yeah, look at the skylight, or the I'm not
Yeah.
sure if it's the glass ceiling. I
Yeah,
mean,
it is with
is it like,
electric light.
aha, it's not the roof in itself?
It's on the roof. It's on top of the
Okay,
roof.
yeah, but
the
so maybe
ballroom.
it's the daylight coming through,
Yeah, could be.
because it's also light on the sides.
Yeah, it's light on the sides, but
Daytime,
I
yeah.
know that they also had the electricity
Ah,
behind
yeah,
the
yeah.
glass, so they could illuminate
Looks
with
amazing.
colored
Colored glass,
bulbs,
stained
so
glass.
they could change the. Oh yeah, here is Annette, the most fancy evening restaurant. Society dance, 5 o'clock tea dance, rendezvous of the Berlin Society, 2 minutes from Bahnhof, from train station Zoologischer Garten, the most modern hotel Berlin, each room with fluent water and telephone, and the room would cost from 10 marks on. So you see the building here at this angle.
Yeah, running water must have been a special thing for at that time.
Yes,
People
exactly.
we can't imagine, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
big.
it really was big. It was
It's
a
like,
whole block,
yeah,
really a whole block.
wow.
And oh no, I didn't print it out. There is one picture that's too funny, because this was so big that they installed a mini golf court on the roof.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's really decadent.
why not? Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, this rooftop was very, very interesting to do fashion shows.
Ah, yeah.
So this is the fashion show of Gerson
That
design.
looks like 30s.
Yeah, it's early 30s.
Yeah. Wow.
And Gerson was a Jewish fashion
I
designer.
think it's Gerson. That was even a brand here and stores in the Netherlands.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, they were quite famous. Oh yeah, and shall I play some music of Eden Hotel?
Yes,
maybe?
because or
Yeah.
or one of these recordings with El Boli, because you have that.
No, I'll start with really one of the first record sessions of Arthur Briggs.
Yeah.
It's on Clausophone. The sound quality is different. This company was not the best recording quality, but they gave the first chance to the Savoy Syncops Orchestra by Arthur Briggs from the Eden Hotel. It's really marked from the Eden Hotel, Berlin,
wow.
to record. And so I have this Clausophone record that I, of course, digitized. And now, again, like you have, the things with the Bildschirm freigeben and
Technique. I will mute myself.
stuff. Yeah. And now I have to reach the sound program. Okay, this also works. Yeah, here we go. And hallelujah.
That was it.
Yeah.
You can
So
you can imagine that kind of music in that place at that time.
yeah, yeah. Somehow you can. So oh, this is even a déjeuner, small
It's like
menu that
the
should be
lunch,
filled with a small paper inside saying the
the
day
daily.
lunch menu. And yeah, so there's some things that survived. The Eden Hotel has a kind of sad story too, because it was used by the German nationalists in 1919 to arrest Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, and both got slaughtered in Eden Hotel,
Oh wow,
and their cadavers were thrown into a channel not far away in Tiergarten. So
corpses.
this is the horrible part of
Yeah,
the anti-democrat movement in 1919 already.
yeah, yeah.
Eden Hotel was quite famous for that. Even in 1943, you could see the so-called town scene girls walking around in small skirts and with leather boots, and some of them with a whip in the hand. It was for the dominas.
The Nominatrix.
Yes.
I will ask.
And although the roof and the highest floor had already burned during the war, it was still working. And only after the war, after the ending of the war, in the early weeks after the war, the whole building burned out and was torn down in 1948. So it's completely gone. There's nothing left of Eden Hotel. They made a triangle square of it, and an intersection of streets, because it used to stand in the middle of an intersection,
Uh-huh.
and now the traffic is flowing there. So it's completely different from what it used to be here.
There's some interesting notion in the book. It describes Berlin in the 20s was still how you say recuperating from the First World War.
Yeah.
There was a lot of poverty, hence prostitution as well. A lot of people. I mean, the rich people were there as well, like the
Yeah.
high society people, but also the very, very, very poor and hungry people. And it's described in the book, and somehow those two worlds came together in jazz in a way.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was an interesting
Yeah.
description in the book.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was for Arthur Briggs his first recordings, and also
Yeah.
with Al Bowley.
Yeah, this was a little later in 1927 when he he was traveling around and he was performing in other cities, but he always came back to Berlin. He stayed in Berlin for 3 months, for 6 months, again for 9 months, but he was traveling around in between. And then he got the offer to record for Deutsche Grammophon, and there the sound quality was a little better. And there was a British band coming to Berlin to perform at the Delphi Palast in Kantstraße after the opening in 1928. It was Billy Bartholomew, he was doing the opening, and he brought his guitar player and singer to Berlin. This was Al Bowley, and Al Bowley was under contract, first with Homochord and then with Deutsche Grammophon, and Arthur Briggs didn't have a singer, and Deutsche Grammophon wanted him to record with a singer, so they proposed Arthur Bowley as a guitar player and singer with Arthur Briggs. And here also I have some of his rare recordings. They are very rare, and I'm proud to have a handful, very few, but a handful of those. And I've chosen one that I like a lot. It's called My Regular Girl, and El Boli recorded it at least 3 times in Berlin, but this is the, like I find it's the most jazzy recording he made in 1927 with Arthur Briggs. So I try to start the technique again. This means I have to do a share screen first. That's tricky. So Bildschirm freigeben. Yeah. Okay.
There was something else. That's fun because you can
Yeah.
really hear him in the
Yeah.
intro show, and in the end, it's really featured with Arthur Briggs. Ah, that's
And
lovely.
it's so beautiful because it really has a fantastic rhythm syncopation. So you really feel there's something going on that's new for the European dance music. They get into a kind of offbeat. It's already a little swingy. This
Yeah, that
music swings. It's not the swing era, but it's a glimpse, a classic
they're
swing.
starting to
Yeah,
understand.
sure. So you have the soloists, and Arthur Briggs is just amazing. And of course, you have the rhythm section. And it's very interesting that Arthur Briggs in Berlin had an international cast. So he had a drummer who was Hungarian. Chappi was his nickname, Oberlander. Chappi Oberlander was playing on the drums for years. He stayed with Briggs for quite a long time before going back to Hungary. And he founded one of the biggest Hungarian jazz and swing bands and was very famous. Still, his name is still very famous in Hungary. And he was making some experimental jazz that's called Signal and Watch Entweder Oder. And so the names of his tunes are very strange and interesting. And yeah, he was very modernistic thanks to the school of Arthur Briggs. So Arthur Briggs had a big influence to German musicians and European musicians, of course. Yeah.
Who was more in the band?
Oh, you know what? I'll
They,
check it up. We take a little break.
yeah, maybe.
We stop the recording and we take a little
And
break.
let's do it. Yeah, because I think we're talking already very long. We will do this fun in parts, maybe. So this
Yeah,
will be part one.
yeah,
We'll take a break and we'll get back. I don't know. You have something more to tell about this band in Berlin, and then we
yes,
get
yes.
back to Paris.
Yeah, Paris will be great. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hello again. To have a little addition to the talk we had yesterday, usually I come back to the errors or some things we couldn't get right with our facts and figures. I come back to that to the next talk. But this time we recorded the talk and it wasn't on Facebook Live, so I can come back to it now. And I just paste it. We'll make 3 parts, I think, because we were interrupted and it was a super long talk anyway. So you will get it in parts. So I reviewed the first part and there is some stuff we mixed up, and I think we should address it straight away. So it becomes a bit clearer if you have seen the first part. I'm mentioning racial fights in Liverpool in 1919. Actually, there were more riots. Actually, it was riots going on in different ports in the UK. You can look it up. There's a good article on, let me see, blackpast.org, and I will read a little bit about that happening when Arthur Briggs arrived in Europe. He arrived in Liverpool in June 12, 1919, when I'm correct, and the whole thing with the race riots started already in January and they lasted till in August or something. But this was happening in June. So this comes from the site to give you a little better view of the thing. The 1919 race riots in Great Britain's seaport areas, such as Liverpool, Cardiff, and Salford, were stoked by social, economical, political political anxieties and anger by white union workers and demobilized white servicemen against blacks, Arabs, Chinese, and ethnic minority communities and businesses. It was one of Britain's most violent periods of racial upheaval in the 20th century. So that quote you can read on Black Past, and it tells also a bit more about the story that happened a few days before Arthur Briggs actually arrived, but it is referred to it in the book, not, I think, not as specific, but it sets the whole story of Arthur Briggs in its time. And the whole racial thing is important throughout the book. So this makes sense as well, how things were in the UK and in Europe. And on June 5, there was Charles Wuthe, a very young, 24 years old only. I think he worked for the like a fireman on a ship or something. There was a whole mob that actually lynched him. They drove him. They were after him, and they drove him in the water, and they threw stones at him. So he drowned. That was like a lynching. So we think things like that were happening in the U.S., but we had our own horrible stories here as well. So there's a plaque, I think, in one of the, I'm not sure, it was called something, one of the docks in Liverpool. So if you're ever in Liverpool, I'd say go and maybe pay a visit and look him up. Look this story up. But it sets the tone of the book of Arthur Briggs. Another mistake I made, I said he was born in Grenada, Arthur Briggs, that it's a small island. Well, it is a small country, but it's not just an island, it's a group of islands. So I don't know that well my geography. I had to look it up. So that's it. Then I was talking about a woman, a violin player, that was joining the Southern Syncopated Orchestra. That took Arthur Briggs and Sidney Bechet to Europe. This woman, I couldn't remember her name, which shame on me, but I'm not good at names and dates and some facts. My memory is not always like I want it to be, because we were talking about her a little bit in our jazz talk about black women from the US that were in Europe. Her name was Angelina Rivera, and she came with her sister Santos Rivera and her father Anthony Rivera, all musicians. They came all with the Southern Syncopated Orchestra, the SSO. They came from Puerto Rico, and she recorded with Josephine Baker on violin, which I think she was very young, still in her teens, or maybe early 20s. I don't dare say. But that was a very interesting story. So I had to find her name again and give you the name. And then we mixed up a bit the story about Arthur Briggs and Sidney Bechet in London with the soprano saxophone. They were walking on the street, and in the music shop, they saw a soprano saxophone, and they both didn't know the instrument. And they went in and they wanted to buy it. Actually, Sidney Bechet wanted to have it, but he didn't have money on him, so Briggs bought it for him. I don't know if he ever paid him back, who knows. But I think not long after, Briggs bought his own, and he was kind of managing better on the instrument when they just got it, and he said it was easier than playing a trumpet. I'm not sure if everybody would agree, but that's what he said in the book. There was another story I mixed up. Well, we mixed something up, and we didn't know the name in French. It was about Eugene Bullard. He was the owner of Le Grand Duc, one of the nightclubs where Bricktop, and I should say her name as well. I keep saying Bricktop because I read her book. Her name was Ada Bricktop Smith. Ada Smith, she was called Bricktop because she had red hair. If you can find her biography, I recommend it as well. So she was working for him. Later, she got her own club as well. So Eugene Bullard, he was fighting in World War One for the French, but he was part of the French Foreign Legion. And we didn't know the name yesterday. Légion étrangère. So I said that. Finally, I know that the French Foreign Legion, of course, it's very obvious once you read about it. So in 1914, he fought in World War I for the Legion. And in 1916, he got injured at Verdun, a very important city in World War I. And after that, he wanted to, in 1916, he joined again. He probably got better again, and he joined the Air Squadron, the Air Squadron Lafayette, and he was fighting planes. and I think he shot down 2 other planes. I don't dare say exactly. Look him up. He's a fascinating figure. In 1917, the United States got involved in World War I as well, and the United States Army Service was recruiting volunteers to fly planes. And Bullard was there. He wanted to fly for the United States, as he was an American citizen, as far as I know. And he passed all medical tests, and then he was not allowed to fly because of the color of his skin. So again, here we go again. But it's good to know that story. So why I'm telling this story, I said that I think it is him. I'm not sure. I read Fats Waller's biography, and in the end of the book, I made a mistake. I said a plane was flying above Harlem on the day of his funeral, which was not true. That's completely wrong. There was a funeral, 1943, but later Fats Waller was cremated, and the ashes were given to this pilot. And he flew them and released the ashes over Harlem. That was how it was. Not the funeral, but the remains, the ashes of Fats Waller were scattered over Harlem, his beloved Harlem. And the book says that it was a pilot, and his name is not mentioned, but he was nicknamed the Black Ace, and that he was a pilot that fought in World War I and the Spanish Civil War. Now I mixed that up again with World War II, which is stupid because we're talking about 1943 and the World War II was still raging. So his name wasn't mentioned, but when I read about Bullard that fought as a pilot, as a black man, which was special in World War I in Europe, and he also had a nickname. Maybe he had more nicknames, but the nickname we know is the Black Swallow of Death. And they knew each other. Fats Waller knew Eugene Bullard because Fats Waller hang out at Bricktops and these nightclub venues where all the people from the States came. So I think Eugene Bullard probably released the ashes of Fats Waller above Harlem. So that was the story. Those were all the things. Maybe there was more. Maybe there's more in the other parts. I will come back to you, or I will come back with Stephan about it. But this I will paste into the video that we will upload on YouTube. Well, thank you very much. See you next time. If my heart could only talk.